Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Whatever it is you're doing, welcome. Welcome to my channel, Legal Vices, where we talk about legal things and vices. See how that works? Glad to have you all here today. We got a bit to bit here. We've got a bit of ground to cover today, so won't spend a lot of time kind of doing a lot of the background stuff like we normally do, but we still hit some major topics. First of all, for those of you that joined 24 hours early, you guys rock. I had a little bit of a scheduling conflict yesterday that resulted in this thing being set up for the wrong time. So welcome back, everybody that was here 24 hours ago, wondering what happened to me. Gosh, where should we start? I guess first of all, we should point out that it's Maritime Monday, where we talk about maritime related things. There's not a whole lot going on this week. Starting next week, there's going to be a bunch of trial work coming for the next probably month. So we're just kind of gearing up for that. We're going to be doing this case today. Tomorrow is going to be a big day. You remember last Tuesday and Wednesday, if you were here, we went through the police questioning interrogation of Sarah Boone, the suitcase case, we'll call it. YouTube's being squirrely. We'll talk about that in just a second. We talked about Sarah Boone. Now, tomorrow we're going to go over the Sarah Boone charging documents, the affidavit the police officers signed to support their arrest of her. We'll do that. She also handwrote a letter, a really, really bizarre letter. We're going to read her handwritten letter. And we're going to be looking at some police questioning of other people involved, family members, neighbors, things like that. So that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. And we will be joined by special guest, Legal Mindset. Andrew from Legal Mindset will be here tomorrow. Stay tuned for that, and possibly someone else. I've sent out a feeler. We might be joined by one or two other people tomorrow. We just have to play that part by ear. But Andrew, Legal Mindset, will definitely be here because we are going to start. This case is going to start on the 30th of this month, Monday, January 30th. And he and I are going to be tag team streaming this trial. I will take it in the evening, starting at this time and going till the lunch break, which will be, right around noon Eastern time. About 2-3 a.m. my time. So I'll go there, and then he'll come and join, and then we'll send everybody over to him where he'll take the afternoon sessions. So that's what's going to be happening during the Sarah Boone trial. Legal Mindset, Andrew and I, we're going to tag team the event. Me taking the morning session, him taking the afternoon session. So join us tomorrow for him. Wednesday, we are going to be looking at the Uvalde incident. The Uvalde Elementary School, there's been a big development, not really a big development, there's been a big release there. The former police chief, Arredondo, video has come out recently that for an interview he gave just a couple of days after the incident happened at the elementary school. We're going to be watching his video. It's quite a thing to watch. So that's Wednesday's Uvalde. Thursday, OJ Simpson. Friday will probably be just another chill Friday stream. And then Friday evening will probably be yet another Unexplained. So that'll take us through the week. But the one you don't want to miss is tomorrow, the Sarah Boone kind of wrap-up, the pre-trial wrap-up that we'll be doing with Andrew Legal Mindset. And YouTube's being squirrely these days. Legal Mindset got an age restriction on his this morning when he was talking about Sarah Boone. Hayden from Aussie Overlord, he got dinged today. Joe, Good Logic Joe, got a strike on him apparently earlier today for just educating people about something. So YouTube's being very, very squirrely. So, and everybody's losing subs randomly. Joe saying he loses a few hundred subs a day. Other people are saying they've been stagnant for months. Me, I lost 30 subscribers in the last 8 hours. It's not like one or two are disappearing every day. It's just YouTube is going through one of these weird phases where things are just happening. We don't know what they are. We don't know what the algorithm is. We don't know who's doing what. But YouTube is notorious for unsubscribing people randomly and completely against their wishes. So, like I said, I got dinged in the last 8 hours, exactly 30 subscribers, as a matter of fact. So please double check to make sure you're still subscribed. That's a big thing. Do that with all of your creators. If you've already subscribed, make sure you're still subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, hey, I deeply appreciate that. No pressure, no hype, but I hope you would like this channel enough to subscribe to it. I think that's kind of all of the background stuff we have to get into today. Um, yeah, got the weekly schedule, got the YouTube shenanigans going on, and yep, I guess that's about it. So we started this yesterday. As I said, I had a little bit of a scheduling problem, and by problem I mean I made a mistake. So we had people pop in and give super chats early. 2 super chats came in. One was from Ron, who said, "Please notice me, senpai. Uh, I'm noticing you. It's just 23 hours and 47 minutes late." And our wonderful mod Alan, he sent a substantial $50 Australian super chat saying, "Cheers, Jeff. I'm sorry to wake you up last night." Yes, it was Alan that saved me. I had just laid down and just closed my eyes when I got a text from Alan saying, "Oh, you might want to come in here. There's about 100 people waiting for you." Oops. So appreciate the heads up there, Alan. All right, before we dive into this, again, the standard rules apply. Super chats are not required. They're gratefully accepted. Whatever you send my way guarantees that you get the super chats read, and I try to pay as much attention as possible to the regular chat and bring up comments that I find particularly timely, informative, or things that everybody else may be curious about, but I can't see them all. But I do see all of the super chats. As a matter of fact, we have 2 right now that need to be addressed while I scroll up rapidly to find the timestamps. We have one from our very own. Where are you all? Right. Starting at 10:09. Wait a minute. All right. I'm scrolling down here. Where did you go? We have 2 super chats that I saw pop up, and I want to bring them up on the screen so we can get right. Okay, there we are. They're bunched up right together. Hyper Shout to started us off, kicked off the super chats for the evening with "I've only heard the longest John song about this. Interested to hear the whole story." This whole story, we are going to be talking about the Halifax explosion in 1997. That's the topic today, and we'll hear some very, very interesting things about that. We'll be looking at multiple sources today. And Flux, super mod Flux. "Too much truth is coming out. I'm being serious. We're being conditioned. Only what's acceptable and approved. The full truth is not approved." YouTube has been squirrely. I'm not going to jinx myself any more than that, but just to say 1917, not 1997, 1917. What does Shabidness? Hey, that body contest. Welcome and thank you so much for the super chat. 1917, everyone, not 1971. See, there's times when you just gotta let misspeaks go, because now there's going to be people quoting 1917, 1917, 1997 question marks for about the next 5 minutes, which derails it. Just let a slip of the tongue go. Y'all knew what I was talking about. All right, here we go. This is what we're looking at. We are looking at the Halifax disaster. What was the Halifax disaster? We're going to get into the details, but long story short, the TLDR on this, it was at the time the largest man-made explosion in the history of planet Earth. That's what this incident was. It was quite literally the largest man-made explosion in human history up to that point. 2,000 people in the city of Halifax were killed. Countless thousands others were injured. And it essentially leveled the city of Halifax. Well, how's that for an intro? 2,000 people dead, a city leveled, and the largest explosion in human history up to that point. Man-made explosion in human history to that point. All right, as we dive into this, remember we have the poll up today. Today's poll for liking and subscribing. If you haven't hit the like button, please do. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And then go and fill out our poll. I hit the like and subscribe. Oh my Lord, did I just close down the poll? Yes, I did. I will put this poll back up while we watch this, because I just clicked it. Dang it. I'll put the poll back up. That was human error, of course. So what the poll is today is I hit the like and subscribe buttons like Rose shoved Jack off the door from the Titanic, like a pirate hitting a bottle of grog, the Titanic hitting an iceberg, and 2 ships bumping in the night. Those are our choices. They will be back up momentarily. So like, subscribe, and hit that, check the poll out. Let's get into this. The Halifax disaster. We're going to provide just a detailed overview here. Then we're going to look at some interesting specifics of that. So time to bring it up and get the show on the road. All right, let's embiggen that and go.
December 6th, 1917. The Great War is raging in much of the Eurasian continent, nearly entering its 4th year. The magnitude of death and destruction is beyond anything humanity has ever witnessed before. The advent of high explosives in the late 19th century has completely revolutionized the destructiveness of warfare. But on the other side of the world, in the quiet little Canadian port of Halifax, the largest man-made bomb ever devised this far was slowly sailing into port. It was about to become one of the greatest disasters in Canadian history. By 1917, the war in Europe had reached a fevered pitch. Intense trench warfare marred the conflict. New technology was developed constantly to better kill the enemy. Aircraft became a major player, and high explosives were used in massive abundance. Ships constantly streamed across the Atlantic, fueling the Allied war machine. But this was when the mighty German U-boat began to take effect, assailing Allied supply lines and making the already difficult trip a living nightmare. Halifax, Nova Scotia became a vital port to the Allies. The deepwater port remained largely ice-free throughout the year. The location of a few islands near the mouth made it extremely defensible, especially with the installation of submarine nets early on in the war. It became a perfect stopping-off point for convoys traveling from North America to Europe. The once quiet, rustic town of Halifax became a booming port town. Its harbor well-suited for a staging point for convoys. The protected harbor of Bedford Basin lay beyond a tight mouth called the Narrows, just 1,000 feet wide, or 304 meters. They were protected from the elements, and the basin itself was deep and wide, good for anchoring ships waiting.
Okay, that's an important thing to note right there. That it's, let's go back and stop it right at that exact point.
Convoys. The protected harbor of Bedford Basin lay beyond a tight mouth called the Narrows.
The Narrows is an important part of this story.
Just 1,000 feet wide, or 304 meters.
304 meters. That's very narrow. And that's going to play a little bit into the logistics of what happens here. The poll is up, so go ahead and take it.
They were protected from the elements, and the basin itself was deep and wide, good for anchoring ships waiting to be fueled and queuing up for a convoy. 20 to 30 ships would group up at a time before being escorted across the Atlantic by ships of the Royal Navy. Despite Halifax being a relatively small and quiet town of about 60,000 people, its useful position would see its population soar. In just 1 month, as many as 15,000 troops had shipped out of Halifax. Several rail lines kept a steady stream of supplies and coal streaming into Bedford Basin to be shipped overseas to aid the war effort. But our tragedy doesn't begin in Halifax, but instead New York. On the 9th of November, the SS Mont Blanc, a 320-foot or 97-meter tramp steamer, sailed into New York after completing a long and treacherous trip from Bordeaux, France. The ship was nothing impressive. Built in 1899 by Sir Railton Dixon and Company of Middleborough in northern Yorkshire, she had already lived a long and neglectful life. Used to haul ore for...
Okay, now we've talked a lot here before about how the older a ship gets, the worse condition it gets in, and how things that aren't subject to normal inspections and whatnot can deteriorate, can rust through that you don't even know. Here, this particular accident doesn't really, as far as I am concerned, and what do I know? I'm just an unfrozen caveman maritime lawyer. I don't think the age of the ship played any real particularly important part of the disaster. But let's hear about the ship's history, because it has quite a history, actually.
For several different companies, the ship was run constantly and maintained very little. Her triple expansion engine could scarcely push her along at a meager 7 knots. Now, pardon my pronunciation here, but when it was bought by the Compagnie Générale Transatlantique, or the French line, in 1915, it wasn't much to look at. Too small and too slow for most jobs, The company simply put its money in thinking the French government would be hiring just about anything that could float and carry goods at the time. They bet correctly, as the Mont Blanc was quickly contracted to haul supplies across the Atlantic. The Mont Blanc was 3,279 gross registered tons and 320 feet or 97 meters in length. She was 44 feet or 13 meters at.
So 97 meters long, this ship is. So essentially, if this ship turns around, it blocks out 1/3 of the entryway of the Narrows into this port, the entry exit way. So there's not a whole lot of room to maneuver if something goes wrong. So, because if you figure that if 200-meter ships had to do some serious maneuvering, you could potentially block off 2/3 of the entrance to this port by two ships having to turn. And that 2/3 is further reduced by you just can't go straight to the edge because you have shallow waters, you have rocks, you have other things. So two ships of this same similar height turning or doing some serious maneuvering in that small area of the Narrows can effectively shut out the entire port. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we look at how these two vessels involved in this maneuver.
At the beam and had roughly a 15-foot or 4-meter draft. It was powered by one triple expansion steam engine and propelled by a single screw. During her service in the Great War, she was outfitted with 2 guns fore and aft for general defense during transatlantic crossings. On this November day, her new captain brought her into port. Once more, pardon my French, my pronunciation isn't that great. For Captain Amy Joseph Marie Lamedec, this had been his first crossing aboard Mont Blanc. The 38-year-old captain had been at sea for 22 of those years. He had achieved his captain's papers just 2 years prior, but he was seen as a skilled and very by-the-book mariner. But quickly the crew realized this would not be a by-the-book trip. They were ordered by the French Admiralty to bypass their usual New York dock and proceed on to Gravesend Bay in Brooklyn. While in Gravesend Bay, the Mont Blanc was descended upon by a small army of shipwrights who proceeded to practically rebuild the ship's cargo hold.
Okay, again, I mean, they're going to talk about it a little bit later, but they've already mentioned it briefly. We've got to remember all of this is happening. All of this story is happening while the world is at war. And Halifax was, as they mentioned, was a hugely important port for the transportation of goods, relief, and troops to support the war effort. And so, as they said, it was a very busy port coming in and out of that very narrow area, and they would have to go in flotillas because one ship sailing across the Atlantic on its own, alone, undefended, is going to meet the scary German U-boats, the submarines, if not the battleships and things. So they had to go in these flotillas that were protected by military transports. And we'll talk about how this all fits in here in a bit.
Every bulkhead and deck space was covered in wood, cloth, tar, and rubber. Small partition compartments were made of wood and even fastened together with copper nails. All of this occurred before a small rotation of police started to guard the ship, ensuring no one was on or off without them knowing. These things only helped confirm the growing fears of the crew, which were soon realized as stevedores began to load the volatile cargo onto the Mont Blanc. So what was in that cargo?
All right, this is not what they're talking about here is not particularly unusual in wartime. You had to carry lots and lots of different things on board that ship. Things that may not always go real well together, but I mean, one of the most common things was bombs or things like that. Chemical war. This is World War I, so you'd have like mustard gas, things like that. Bombs, mustard gas, and passengers. Those don't usually go real well together. But you get a lot of these combinations, and this was the perfect nightmare cargo.
62 tons of gun cotton, a compound used in place of gunpowder in firing artillery. 250 tons of TNT, a well-known high explosive, and 2,366 tons of picric acid. And at this time, lesser known but even more volatile high explosive. The flashing point of TNT being around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The flash point for picric acid is only around 572 degrees. Thus, the point of all the partitions and sparkless fittings was to keep any sparks out of the volatile cargo.
How's that for a picture? Manufacturing and preparing munitions for loading. All of those go boom. Ugh. And as they're talking about, you have 3 explosive cargoes, all with different flash points, and 570 degrees. It's not all that high, really. But yeeks. So you can see what we're building here. We're building a several thousand kilogram bomb.
The crew were even forbidden from carrying matches while on board.
Yeah, well, that's smart.
So once the Mont Blanc was fully loaded, she came out to around 3 kilotons of TNT, about a fifth of the yield of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima several decades later.
Yeah, so now you've got the size of this bomb. How is that? All right, Flux wants me to read her super chat now. 2 ships bumping in the night just tickles my fancy. There, Flux, are you happy now? Thank you for the super chat, Flux. And on while we're at it, super sticker pulling us up to date. Thank you so much for that. What's up there, side dog? All right. So we've got this ginormous bomb that's being built. Matilda Finn says, I just hopped on our ship, so this didn't explode at sea. We'll stand by. You'll hear all about how and where, and then how it all happened.
Once the Mont Blanc was fully loaded, she came out to around 3 kilotons of TNT, about a fifth of the yield of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima several decades later. A volatile cargo, to say the least. But when packed safely in the hold with its wooden compartments and sparkless fittings, a relatively safe cargo.
Okay, and there we go. There's the keyword, relatively safe. They're sitting on a relatively safe cargo that's 1/5 the power of the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. 3,000 tons of TNT, essentially. That's the deal. They're sitting on effectively a nuclear bomb, but it's relatively safe.
Nothing short of a massive jolt or an out-of-control fire could detonate it.
Oh God, there you go. The only 2 things that could set this huge pile of explosives off is a jolt and an out-of-control fire. Here you go. Take your pick. Take your gamble. What do you think happened?
Confusingly, the stevedores received a last-minute order from the French government. There was still room aboard Mont Blanc, so they ordered the unloading of 494 barrels of benzol.
Oops.
Benzol was a newly created coal tar product made of benzene and toluene. It had many uses, but during World War I, it was used mostly for motor fuel. One thing was well known about it: it was highly flammable.
So not only are they sitting on 1/5 of the Hiroshima nuclear bomb, they're sitting on 3,000 tons of TNT equivalency. Well, now let's just suddenly do something we hadn't planned on. What's that? Oh, let's put on like 500 barrels of really flammable fuel. You can see how this is shaping up.
The barrels were stacked wherever there was room, inside the cargo hold and even on deck where they could be 3 or 4 barrels high.
And not just put it in one part. Let's just scatter all of this fuel all around, fill in all the nooks and crannies with this oil.
While the TNT and picric acid was fastened down tight, The barrels were more slapdash, with thin canvas straps over stacks of barrels. It was a more rushed job for what seemed like a less hazardous cargo.
All right, and this is going to play into it. This is going to come back where they said it's not a lot of it wasn't lashed down properly. A lot of it was stacked on top of each other. And while we're stopped here, Andrew Pigchick, sorry. Andrew looks like a very Polish last name, which could be, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't pronounce it, sorry. The Halifax explosion is one of the things discussed in detail in our Department of Energy Explosive Safety and Handling courses. There's a lot to learn from this. A lot to learn. Thank you so much for that super chat. Deeply appreciated. Thank you for the insight.
With flammable benzol over high explosives, in essence, they had simply added the fuse to the world's biggest bomb up to that point. High explosives had a very high ignition temperature, but surrounded by fuel, they now had the means to achieve just that. On December 1st, the Mont Blanc was fully loaded and ready to depart for Europe. Captain Le Medec would meet with the British Admiralty. They were responsible for organizing the convoys that crossed the Atlantic. The liaison asked if the Mont Blanc could maintain a speed of just 8 knots. Le Medec, who was still new to the ship, consulted his logs and was remiss to say she probably could not. The officer was, of course, concerned. A convoy could only go the speed of its slowest ship. The Mont Blanc would be slowing down an entire convoy. So he ordered the ship to sail unescorted to Halifax, Nova Scotia. There her fate would be left in the hands of the convoy officer. If he determined she could not keep up, Captain Le Medec was given a secret alternate route in an envelope to open and follow should the need arise. So the Mont Blanc would depart, its entire crew on edge. They slowly sailed north, hugging the American and Canadian shore, trying desperately to fight through a storm that blew in from the west. Each wave they plowed through felt like it would detonate the powder keg they now stood upon. Sleep was light and fitful for all aboard during that few days' journey.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, plying its way across the North Atlantic, bound for the same port of Halifax, was the SS IMO.
Introduce the IMO. A little bit of foreshadowing here. Remember when they said one of the only 2 things that would set this off was a severe jolt? Introducing the severe jolt. Now, this is important. This is important here to watch and pay attention to the maneuverings of these ships, because there's some things going on. It's not really foreshadowing, is it? It's more just like telling you what's going to happen. But it's important. This isn't a big mystery what happened. It's important to know what's going on so you can appreciate. If we know what's going on, you can appreciate what they didn't know was going on. So first of all, we've got the bomb on the ship, basically. We've got war. So you're being forced to carry these random things that don't normally get shipped together in support of the war effort. You've got a lot of people lined up ready to go on the same flotilla. And you've got a very narrow space to work with. You've got port congestion, and you've got another ship coming in.
This Norwegian registered whaling factory ship had ceased its whaling duties for a far more humanitarian duty. It was chartered by the Belgian Relief Commission to carry vital supplies and humanitarian aid across the Atlantic to the beleaguered region of Europe. Being a neutral nation and a humanitarian duty, it was believed that it would be unmolested by German U-boats. But just to ensure this, a large Belgian relief in large 10-foot-tall letters was painted across the sides, just in case. Built in 1889 in Belfast, Ireland, the 5,043-ton freighter was already fairly past its prime. 430 feet or 131 meters in length.
All right, remember our numbers, folks, because this comes into play. We've essentially got 100 meters of the other vessel, and we've got 131 meters of this vessel. This is 231 meters of ships in a 300 meter wide narrow space that are going to be coming into each other. So you've literally got 70 meters if something goes drastically wrong that they have to maneuver in. And when you're talking about 131 meter ship and 100-meter ship, plus some rocks and shallow water on either side of this narrow passageway, you are coming up with only a few meters of wiggle room in an emergency.
Length, with a 45-foot or 13-meter beam and a 30-foot or 9-meter draft. With her single triple expansion engine, she could produce about 424 nominal horsepower, pushing her along at 12 knots, nearly double the Mont Blanc. At the time, she was heading from Rotterdam for Halifax, ballasted down, her final destination being New York for supplies to bring back to Europe. At the command of IMO was 47-year-old Norwegian captain Håkon From. With nearly 30 years of experience on the sea, From was an accomplished and skilled mariner. He was steely-eyed and focused, but he was well known for his impatience and even bouts of rage. On a previous trip to Philadelphia, the IMO docked to receive repairs to the ship's engine and boiler. The repairs were performed by Schmal Engineering Works. They took 10 days, and the company owner quoted it at about $9,000, well over $200,000 USD in today's currency. But when Gustav Schmal came to collect his payment for a job well done, Captain Fraum refused to pay and refused to elaborate upon why.
That
Schmal,
doesn't build very good
frustrated at
morale,
this,
does it?
departed and returned with his attorney. But this still didn't cause the tight-fisted Fraum to budge. When the attorney departed to repair legal papers, Fraum fell into a fit of rage. Schmal recounts, "He acted like a maniac. Fraum glared at me like a man out of his mind and snarled like a beast. Raising his big fists, he brought them down on my head, knocking me to the floor. Then, cursing horribly, he picked me up bodily and hurled me through the door of the cabin. As soon as I regained my feet, I ran for my life." After that, Fraum unmoored his repaired yet unpaid-for IMO and fled. He sailed down the Delaware until Schmal's attorney and the U.S. Marshals caught up with the IMO with a tugboat. Now Fraum wasn't just fixed with the $9,000 for the repair, but an additional $11,000 for his assault and flight. No explanation was ever offered for his actions except from his own attorney that stated Fraum was deeply anti-German.
Well, I guess it's easy to understand the deeply anti-German sentiment during that particular point in time in history, I guess. But, for some reason, my mic is really super hot, isn't it? All right, I'm bringing my mic down because I just checked and gave myself a headache. So let me know how this sounds. All right, let's get back to our anti-German guy here.
Gustav Schmal, of course, being of German ancestry. Norway, despite being neutral in the present conflict, had suffered greatly to German torpedoes and mines, leaving a deep resentment for the country in the hearts of many Norwegian mariners. So despite being a competent and capable mariner, Captain Fraum was short-tempered and impatient. So you can imagine the captain's great displeasure upon arriving in Halifax and hearing he'd have to wait for an inspection, as well as having to wait to receive bunkering. The vital convoy ships in the harbor taking precedence over his neutral relief ship. The Mont Blanc finished her 850-mile journey northwest through storm and gale, arriving outside Halifax Harbor on the 5th of December. They steamed for an examination anchorage outside McNabb's Island as a Royal Canadian Navy tugboat steamed out to meet them. They were arriving just at sunset, darkness falling as a harbor tug deposited one of Halifax's harbor pilots aboard. Hopping aboard was 45-year-old Haligonian Francis Mackey. The pilot had been to sea since he was a mere 12 years old and became an apprentice pilot at just 21, gaining his master's papers in 1899. By 1917, Mackey had been guiding ships into the port of Halifax for 24 years. Captain Lemedec and Francis Mackey greeted one another. Lemedec's English only barely.
All right, now's a good time to bring up one interesting part of this story, I think. Mackey here plays an interesting part of the story in our ship. In our case, we have a relation here. One of our regular viewers. I don't know if I'm supposed to say who it is or not. So if you're here and you want yourself to be known, a lot of you have requested this particular incident since we started doing Maritime Monday. But one of the people that suggested we do this is one of our viewers here, who will remain unnamed unless she wants to name herself. Says that her great grandfather was the pilot Francis Mackey. And this is part of the email that I received. I was watching Maritime Monday and have a perfect story for you. It's the story of the Halifax explosion and the persecution of Francis Mackey. On December 6, 1917, two ships, the city was devastated. The pilot of the Mont Blanc was wrongly persecuted for this horrific destruction. He survived, but the pilot of the IMO died in the explosion. Even though Francis Mackey was eventually exonerated, that initial blame would hang over him and his family for many years thereafter. That is my husband. Francis Mackey was his great-grandfather. So Francis Mackey is apparently the great-grandfather of one of the people here that's watching us now. Just thought I would mention that. And see, there we go. It's Robbie Dobby. Francis Mackey is my husband's great-grandfather. So again, this happened with one of the other shows we did. People were saying that one of the people involved was her ex-husband. This show, it's like I said, it's always one of my smallest shows I do in the week. It's definitely, well, it is the smallest. It's always the smallest show that I do, but it has a very, very dedicated viewership, which is all of you, and it brings people that are involved in the maritime industry here. And so we get a lot of people that are involved in some of these more modern incidences that actually watch this and know what's going on. So I just thought I would point that out. We'll let you all talk amongst yourselves, and we'll get back to the story here.
Just 21, gaining his master's papers in 1899. By 1917, Mackey had been guiding ships into the port of Halifax for 24 years. Captain Lemedec and Francis Mackey greeted one another, Lemedec's English only barely passable. The pair retired to the captain's cabin, where Mackey learned, with some dismay, just what the Mont Blanc was hauling. It made little difference to his job as a pilot, but of course he was set on edge knowing he'd be piloting a massive bomb into Halifax. Mackey then tried to explain with great difficulty that the ship would likely have to stay out of the harbor until morning. The submarine nets strung across the mouth of the harbor would be lifted into place for the night. He finally got his point across as the Canadian Navy ship inspector climbed aboard to speak with the captain and check his manifest before departing for the night. That Wednesday night, Mont Blanc would sit anchored near the McNabb's Island lighthouse, waiting for dawn. Aboard, Captain Lemedec, pilot Francis Mackay, and the officers of the Mont Blanc sat and ate dinner and had some coffee as they made an attempt at conversation. Mackay produced some cigars, offering them to the others, who looked at him with concern before the captain firmly stated, "Non, il est interdit de fumer." No smoking on the ship. The following morning, Thursday, the 6th of December, the anti-submarine nets were lowered as Mont Blanc received the signal to proceed north towards Halifax.
All right. Again, for those if you didn't follow that, it's just like, I don't know if you remember the scene from Game of Thrones where the ships went into the port, and they've done it on Vikings as well. The ships will go into the port and then they'll raise up some kind of net or bar to prevent the ships from leaving, and then they just attack them and destroy them. Well, what they were doing was at night, when they couldn't see what was going on well and didn't have a good enough lookout, they would raise these essentially giant nets that would prevent the Russians that would prevent the German submarines from entering into the port and doing damage. So yes, that's why the ship couldn't come in that night. It had to wait outside. It's waiting outside. And then the next morning comes and they're allowed to go in.
To her temporary berthing in Bedford Basin. At 7:50, she lifted anchor. It was just a 90-minute trip. Then she would anchor for the day, then proceed east across the Atlantic with a convoy, this time the following morning. Typically, with her hazardous cargo, the Mont Blanc would display the Bravo flag, a red flag with a swallowtail to denote that she had hazardous cargo on board. But due to it being wartime, this protocol was often waived.
Actually, it was more than waived. It was really, really strongly prohibited in most places. You don't want this ship to say, okay, we're leaving port loaded with a bajillion tons of explosives. This is us. We have lots of explosives. Please don't shoot us and all of the explosives we have on board. So you have to keep the cargo of the ship a secret from everybody, including other ships. So you had all these people sleeping very uncomfortably the night before, knowing they can't get out of port while sleeping on this gigantic bomb. And you can't tell the other ships around what's on your giant floating bomb.
The flag only being good for showing the enemy exactly which ship in a convoy will make the biggest boom.
Yeah.
As Mont Blanc started her morning trip northbound to Bedford Basin, the IMO was on a reciprocal course. She had finished her bunkering the night before, but was too late to get underway for New York.
Okay, but bunkering is getting oiled. It's gassing up. It's fueling up your ship. So the IMO is finished fueling, and it's coming from the opposite direction,
much to the chagrin of Captain Fromm. But in the morning of the 6th, the IMO pulled the hook. It was now underway and steaming south out of Bedford Basin and into the Narrows. Acting as the pilot on this outbound trip was harbor pilot William Hayes. The 43-year-old was born near to Halifax just as his comrade Francis Mackay was. In fact, both were very close friends. Both were extremely skilled mariners, Hayes having over 2 decades of experience under his belt. Both ships appearing to be in very good hands as they began their morning transits. The IMO heading south to open ocean and then New York, the Mont Blanc north into Bedford Basin. But the IMO's trip south through the Narrows would not go uninterrupted. We know this because I'm doing a video about the disaster that ensued from it. At around 8:15, the IMO entered the narrow channel to their starboard side of the channel, Halifax to their right and Dartmouth to their left, on the far side of the Narrows. They were traveling at a good clip, around 7 knots, fairly fast for inside the harbor. But upon entering the channel, they were met with a tramp steamer, the SS Clara, steaming upwards towards them, also on the starboard side of the channel. Typically, this was seen as poor seamanship, the rules dictating that you should favor the side of the channel that lay to your starboard.
Okay, that all might be really, really confusing. I was just, when I watched it the first time, it made sense to me, but that's what I do. And then now I'm sort of watching it together with you guys, and you realize that might not make a whole bunch of sense. So essentially what he's saying is that ships should always sail as far as possible to the right side of whatever channel they're in. Whatever they should just stay. They should stick as far as possible to the right side. I was going to show this next video a little bit later, but I was going to show a different part. But this other video does a very, very good description of explaining exactly what was happening at this time. So I'm gonna go off script here a bit and bring up this other video. Where'd you go, other video? There we go. Oh, and by the way, this first video we were looking at is from the site Maritime Horrors. You definitely want to go to Maritime Horrors, HORRORS, and check out their videos. Some really, really cool stuff there. Like and subscribe to them as well. And pray we don't get a copyright strike, because I've already got one. So this other one is from a site called 60 Symbols. And she does a really, really good job of portraying the movements of these ships. So let me... Where are we at? A lot of the same stories here. Oh, wait. Never mind. That's the story we're looking at. Right. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. Hang on. Dump out of this and bring up the right one that I wanted to look at. Sorry for going off script here. Dang it. Now I got to go back and find out where we were on the other one too. All right. Where are we? All right. There we go. It's kind of right about where we want to go.
Both want to get through the harbor in different directions. According to the rules of the road, they should be passing port side to port side, which means they should come across like this.
Okay. So as you can see here from this diagram, in principle, each of these ships should be sailing as far as possible to the right side. The starboard side is the right side of a ship. So this bottom ship is going that way, is going to our right. And so they should be staying towards the Halifax side. And the other ship should sail as close as possible to the Dartmouth side. And then so their left sides should pass each other. The left side, port to port is called starboard side, the port side. This is what's supposed to happen. You stay to the right, they stay to the right. And it's just like two cars passing each other in America. You stay on the right side of the lane, the oncoming traffic stays on the right side of their lane, and you leave a big space between you. That's what's supposed to happen.
Yes, navigating carefully and slowly to get through the Narrows. However, that's not what happens. The Emo takes this corner wide to avoid an oncoming ship, while the Mont Blanc is keeping its station.
And that was the ship we were just talking about in the other video. So the IMO goes way off to the left side, and the Mont Blanc is doing its job by staying on the right side.
On the correct side. At this point, they're a few kilometers apart. And remember, it's 1917, and the conventional way of communicating is through whistles. So the Mont Blanc whistles first. That means by rights, they should retain right of way. And they say, one whistle, I'm staying where I am. The Emo, unbelievably, responds with a cross signal, two whistles. No, I'm keeping this station. Now we have a problem. The Emo is moving quite fast. It's not loaded with anything. So it's sitting high in the water and it's moving probably faster than the speed limit. The Mont Blanc cuts its speed. Again, one whistle, even moves over slightly to the starboard side, the Dartmouth side. I'm staying here. Two whistles from the Emo. No, I'm staying here. At this point, heads would have turned.
Yeah, I mean, I hear this all the time out my window because there's a bunch of ships that go past the ocean here close all the time. And you always hear things like this happening where they signal each other. I mean, now they use radio a lot, but sometimes you can't understand. You can't hear them on the radio. You don't speak the same language, whatnot. Everybody should be able to communicate in English, but that doesn't always happen. So sometimes you have to use the ship's whistle. And you'll hear something like three whistles, which is uncommon. You'll hear it once and that's it. But if you keep hearing it, you know there's something not quite right because you shouldn't have to say it more than once. And so if you have to keep repeating your message, something's going wrong. And she gave us a good idea of what's going on. So I hope you got the good visual of what was happening. Let me go back and try to find out where we were in the other video because I was messing it up like a dork. That's what happens when I go off script. Yeah. Right, here we go. I have no idea how far along we were because I'm an idiot. Okay, I'm coming out. There we go. We'll start like right here.
Was on a reciprocal course.
Yes.
She had finished her.
So they're head to head coming out of here. And as they said, the ship turned wide while the Mont Blanc is coming up on the right side like it should.
Bunkering the night before, but was too late to get underway for New York, much to the chagrin of Captain Frown. But in the morning of the 6th, the IMO pulled the hook. It was now underway and steaming south out of Bedford Basin and into the Narrows. Acting as the pilot on this outbound trip was harbor pilot William Hayes. The 43-year-old was born near to Halifax just as his comrade Francis Mackay was. In fact, both were very close friends. Both were extremely skilled mariners, Hayes having over 2 decades of experience under his belt. Both ships appearing to be in very good hands as they began their morning transits. The IMO heading south to open ocean and then New York, the Mont Blanc north into Bedford Basin. But the IMO's trip south through the Narrows would not go uninterrupted. We know this because I'm doing a video about the disaster that ensued from it. At around 8:15, the IMO entered the narrow channel to their starboard side of the channel, Halifax to their right and Dartmouth to their left, on the far side of the Narrows.
So if we look at that here, Halifax is over here, down on the bottom, and Dartmouth is up here on the top. As we've said, the Mont Blanc is going up this way on the Dartmouth side. And the IMO is supposed to be coming out of the port on the Halifax side.
They were traveling at a good clip, around 7 knots, fairly fast for inside the harbor. But upon entering the channel, they were met with a tramp steamer, the SS Clara, steaming upwards towards them, also on the starboard side of the channel. Typically, this was seen as poor seamanship, the rules dictating that you should favor the side of the channel that lay to your starboard. Hayes, a bit irritated with the Clara's departure to the rules, signaled on the ship's whistle 1 short blast. This indicated that he wished to pass to the port of Clara, a subtle hint for the steamer to move towards the correct side of the channel. Adamantly, Clara answered with 2 short blasts, indicating she wished to pass the IMO to her starboard and keeping to the wrong side of the channel. Hayes was irritated, but in a hurry. He answered the signal with 2 short as well and adjusted his course to port, putting the IMO more towards the center of the narrow channel and nearer to the wrong side of the channel. Further down the channel, upbound to Bedford Basin, was an ex-Navy gunboat turned tug, the 125-foot Stella Marais. She was towing 2 barges, also heading for Bedford Basin. She was moving at an almost standstill pace, right in the center of the channel.
Kitty asks, what's a tramp steamer? A tramper is just like a ship. It just kind of goes up and down the coast here, but this probably just stays in the port or just goes down the coast a little ways. It's just like a little local kind of transport thing. You just kind of move things up and down the coast. It doesn't go internationally or, sail other parts of the world. Just a local little guy.
Much to the irritation of Pilot Hayes. He decided once more to signal 2 short blasts on the whistle and come more to port and more to the wrong side of the channel. The slow Stella Marais begrudgingly agreed and also came to port. The captain of the tugboat, afraid that should he come to starboard instead, his cables or barges may get overrun by the much faster IMO. So it came to be that the IMO was downbound at high speed on the wrong side of the channel, just as the Mont Blanc was entering the channel in the opposite direction, on the correct side of the channel. Spotting IMO blaring down the wrong side of the channel, Captain Lemedec and Pilot McKay on the much slower Mont Blanc initiated the standard 1 short blast whistle signal before.
So here's a good diagram of what is to come. Now remember the IMO was over here because of this other ship that wouldn't get out of the way and made him swing wide. And that's on a head-to-head course here with the Mont Blanc coming into port. And so we're back to the whistles.
On the much slower Mont Blanc initiated the standard 1 short blast whistle signal before steering to starboard and slowing her engines. They inched closer to the already very close Dartmouth shore, but IMO didn't return the signal. Pilot Hayes instead returning a 2 short blast signal. He was already.
Now, if you remember what he just said, the other ship, he got pissed because they played the 1 whistle, 2 whistle games with his other ship, and now he's involved in the opposite game with the Mont Blanc. The Mont Blanc slows down and turns closer to the Dartmouth side, like right back here. The Mont Blanc slows the engines down, gets as close as possible to the Dartmouth side, and says, hey, would you mind getting back on your side of the channel with 1 blast of the whistle, which says, I'm staying here. This is my lane. I'm staying put. Now we have the IMO who's giving 2 whistles saying, no, I'm staying here.
Already so far to the port side of the channel, it would be pointless to come to starboard for him. Neither the pilot nor Captain Fromm had any idea they were playing chicken with a floating bomb. Once more.
See, now that's the interesting thing. That's where we talk about what you don't know can be very, very dangerous. I am sure, just from a basic seaman point of view, that if you saw that this thing was carrying really, really dangerous cargo, you would go out of your way to stay out of its way. You may even likely go, why don't you just get yourself all the way out of this narrow area here? Why don't you just come on in and do your thing? and we'll just stay out of your way. We'll leave after that. You would have done something to avoid this situation if you knew there was a gigantic bomb floating in front of you.
More, the Mont Blanc signaled her intentions to come to starboard, and once more IMO signaled the intentions of coming to port. The vessels were creeping closer. On this course, they would surely hit each other. Even if Mont Blanc somehow missed the IMO, she'd likely run aground on the Dartmouth shore. But Captain Lemedec was in a game of chicken now. If he suddenly changed course at the same time as IMO, they would still hit. But it was his only option. He ordered course change to port, the helmsman feverishly whipping the wheel to port, the bow slowly turning. Just as it seemed the two ships may just scrape past one another, the
All right, let's see if I can diagram. I always get screwed up with my hands. We have the one ship coming in, the other ship coming in. They're coming head to head. And well, let's say they're supposed to be this way. So this ship over here says, I'm over here. You need to get back over here. But this ship sticks out. So what are the options? You can hit head on, you can go aground, or you can take the only option available to you, which is to do the wrong thing and go to port. So you turn your ship this way and hope you pass. But the big fear, as always, in the game of chicken is that you'll both turn that direction. If you turn like this, no problem. But if you both turn like this, then you do this and you collide. So basically, the ship was saying, I hope this guy doesn't turn, but if I turn right, I'm going to ground. If I don't do anything, I'm probably going to hit him. So even though I shouldn't turn to port, I have to turn port to port in a last-ditch effort. And he was hoping they would just get back enough distance between them that they would pass each other barely. But while we're here, no Wisconsinite cuisine, only hate for Germans. Okay, Sullen the Lich. And Viking Wolf by Blood, thank you so much for the super chat. You are amazing super chat. Well, thank you very, very much. Deeply appreciate it. So let's get to the bad part of our story here.
The IMO made one final fatal mistake. Either Captain Fromm or Pilot Hayes ordered the IMO into astern propulsion, signaling this with 3 short blasts on the whistle. The speeding IMO slowed down considerably.
All right, why is this a mistake? The reversing propulsion is basically the ship equivalent of trying to throw the emergency brake. You still have this damnable thing called inertia, where even if your ship is going ahead, and even if you go full astern with the engine, even if you just reverse engines completely, you're still going to go ahead quite a ways before you slow down, eventually reach 0 knots, and then start actually going backwards. But he's trying to slow this ship down as much as possible. Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Actually, it was exactly the wrong thing to do. And he's going to explain why here.
But there was one glaring issue with how single-screw ships react to astern propulsion. Instead of simply stopping and backing straight like a car, it often causes the ship to twist in the rotational direction of the screw. So as the IMO slowed, her stern began to swing to port as her bow swung starboard.
Okay. Yeah, so that's exactly what you don't want to have happen. When you start going backwards, it starts to make your ship do that. Ugh.
Now, as the Mont Blanc looked as though she may clear the IMO's bow swung into the middle of the channel, right into the path of the floating bomb. McKay saw this all occurring as if in slow motion. He yelled out, "There's going to be a collision, full speed astern." Hayes on the IMO yelling something similar. But it was far too little, far too late. As the ships slowed, their bows aligned, and the two ships collided bow to bow at 8:46 a.m. Had it been any other ship, this collision would not have been noteworthy.
That's the important thing here. If this would have been any other ship, it would have been just another stupid collision in port, minor damage. Everybody's insurance companies get mad at each other. They fix them and they go about their merry little ways. Steve the Sheep got asked, couldn't use your rudder to counteract this. To a certain extent, if you had figured that was going to happen. But again, as they were saying, you didn't realize that it would have that effect of when you reverse engines of sort of sending you in the same direction as the propeller spins. So it was just an oversight. It was just a thing. They got into a swinging contest, and this is what happened. Because as you'll remember, one of the two things that will set off all of this cargo is a sudden jolt. Well, introduce sudden jolt. The two ships hit each other in port.
The IMO sustained little, if any, real damage. The Mont Blanc's hull was punctured down to the waterline and up to the main deck, but was still floating just fine. Any other ship, and the worst that would have occurred, is a battle of two insurance companies over who was at fault and who would pay whom. But the Mont Blanc was carrying the world's largest bomb. As the IMO's bow sliced into the Mont Blanc, they successfully avoided hitting the center of the ship, loaded with her picric acid, gun cotton, and TNT, but instead hit several stacks of benzol. The precariously stacked barrels having their lashings snapped as they toppled and broke open, spilling the volatile fuel.
Remember, that was the really highly flammable brand new fuel they were developing. So all of those cargo, kegs that hadn't been lashed properly or securely, that just been stuffed everywhere. Well, now they start falling and breaking and spreading fuel all over the hold.
Everywhere. Fuel ran down the decks and pooled in the hull. All that was needed was one spark, which the...
Yeah, so you got two metal ships smashing into each other. What do you think the chances are that a spark is going to happen when one ship literally plows into the side of another ship?
Fuel ran down the decks and pooled in the hull. All that was needed was one spark, which the IMO eagerly provided. Still operating astern propulsion, the ship pulled away from its stricken counterpart, steel grinding on steel as they separated, showering the fuel-soaked deck with sparks that immediately ignited the benzol.
Oops.
A wisp of black smoke snaked up from the hold that slowly grew into a full-blown fire on the bow, engulfing and spreading slowly. The crew of the IMO were sluggish in their response to the collision, but Mont Blanc's was not. Having spent the better part of a week in fear of exactly what had just occurred, the crew on deck retreated to the pilot house as the flames on the bows spread into an inferno. Had the fire been anywhere else, there may have been something they could do, but as it was, the ship's only fire pump was located on the bow. Even if they wanted to anchor to keep the ship in the middle of the harbor, both of the anchors were located on the bow.
Yeah. So you think this is bad now. Well, there's still 15 minutes of story and a bunch of other stuff to talk about. We are just getting started here. So you can kind of see what happened here. Right where these green arrows are, that's where the ship started to where the IMO started to reverse its engines, which caused the stern of the ship to swing this way and the bow of the ship to swing to the right to starboard, which connected with these two. And that right about here is where the crew of the Mont Blanc say, "Oh crap, this is exactly what we thought would happen. This is why we didn't really want to be here. This is really why we didn't want to do this. We know what's going to happen. It's time for us to get the hell off this ship."
The next option would have been to scuttle the ship, but the Mont Blanc was old and poorly maintained. It would take up to a half hour to open the valves to begin scuttling the ship, then nearly 2 hours for her to actually sink.
So how interesting is that? One of the options for getting rid for putting out the fire and trying to avoid an explosion is to sink the ship. But the ship was too old to sink. It would have taken too long to open the valves to let all the water in, and it would have taken too long for the water to actually fill it enough to sink. It was literally too old to sink. intentionally, quickly.
While this process would take hours, they had only minutes. Now, it's easy for you or I to imagine what we do in this situation as a reader or a viewer. It's simple for us to opine and explain what heroic deeds we performed to save the day. For a brief moment, Francis Mackey considered turning the Mont Blanc south, pinning the throttle down and steaming out of the harbor. The inflow of water from the bow could likely slow the spreading fire. Maybe he could even douse it. But should
That was some really, really good thinking on the part of the pilot to even have that idea. You know, that's the old Superman grabbing the nuclear weapon under his arm and flying off into space to detonate it. He was hoping that he thought maybe we can get out of port, maybe we can get out of the harbor before it explodes, and maybe the water, as we go as fast as we can, will help slow down the spread of the flames. Great idea to have that.
the vessel detonate in a minute or so, he'd have saved no one and only succeeded in killing himself. It's easy to say,
but you just don't know how long you have until the whole thing goes up. That's the problem with that theory.
You'd be the hero, but unless you were there in Pilot Mackey's shoes, you'd never know. The pilot gave the order to the mustered crew. Look to your boats. The crew needed little coaxing as they ran for the two lifeboats, thankfully located at the stern of the ship. Captain Lamedec agreed with the order, laying below to notify the engineers of the order. But when it came time for the captain himself to step off, he was harder to persuade, insisting on several occasions that he would stay with the burning ship. He finally needed to be convinced by his crew to depart the doomed vessel. All the while, the rest of the crew sat in their boats, sweating next to the burning bomb of a ship.
That's based. That's ballsy right there for that captain. I still want to go down with his ship, and I've seen this. I've seen. I mean, not in this kind of an emergency situation, but I've seen situations where captains have had to just abandon a ship because it was sinking or for other things, and the captain has literally been in tears that he couldn't. That's how much they can put in, how much of their life they can put into making these their ships. I've seen captains in tears that they just didn't leave them alone on the ship to go down with it. It's like the ultimate failure. They feel it's the ultimate failure as a captain to go to land without your ship. If your ship dies, you should too. That's some old school thinking.
Ship, waiting for their order to depart. The entire front end of Mont Blanc was engulfed in flames by now, as fires burned out of control in the hold. In a final act, Lamedec locked the ship's helm in place to keep the ship from spinning erratically as she drifted. But slowly, the burning vessel was drifting towards the Halifax piers, specifically Pier 6. With the crew loaded in the lifeboats, the two boats made for the nearby Dartmouth shore, shouting to anyone that would listen that the Mont Blanc was loaded with explosives. Yet few would listen, many too dumbfounded by the burning ship to worry about the crazed rowing Frenchmen fleeing their burning ship. In Halifax, the day was just beginning, the sleepy port town heading off to their Thursday workdays. Some at the sugar refinery nearby, others to the ships in the port. Hundreds of Halifax's school children headed to school, their school days delayed from 9 a.m. to 9:30 for the winter months, giving the schools time to heat up the boilers and the sun to rise. Word of the burning ship in the harbor spread fast, the plume of black, acrid smoke visible from all over town. Crowds began to gather on the shore as the inferno grew on the ship. None were the wiser that the vessel was packed to the gills with 6 million pounds of explosives. Even as barrels of benzol exploded and were sent flying hundreds of feet into the air, none seemed to be largely concerned, nor could they have anticipated just how catastrophic the event was about to be. Though the town didn't simply sit back and enjoy the show, several vessels moved in close to the burning ship to attempt to render aid. A small boat was dispatched from the nearby cruiser HMS Highflyer to see what could be done. The tug Stella Marais, after anchoring her two barges, returned to try and render aid as well, attempting to hook up towing cables to the burning ship, which at this time had drifted onto Pier 6 and was lighting the wooden pier ablaze. On shore, a fire alarm was pulled as nervous shopkeepers used their telephones to call the local fire stations.
Now here's where if you followed the Texas explosion we did a couple of months ago, you saw there that people all around were coming to the pier to see the fire. They were watching the fire. They were, ooh, look, a fire. Let's go look at it. This is really neat and really unusual. You start to see the same thing happening here.
Multiple fire stations responded, including one which had the first motorized fire engine in the city. Firefighters speeding towards Pier 6 to attempt to fight the blaze burning out of control. The Mont Blanc now nearly entirely engulfed as the clock struck 9 a.m. On the Dartmouth shore, the crew of the Mont Blanc reached shore with their lifeboats, barreling out of them without even tying them down. Certain any moment there would be a flash, then nothing but death. They passed a stunned native woman holding her infant child. She had come out of her home to watch the burning ship. The sailors yelled at her to run, which only frightened the woman. Thinking fast, a crewman ran up and snatched the infant from the woman's arms before taking off for the hills for cover. It worked. The woman gave chase. These two would be the only people that the crew of the Mont Blanc managed to save that day. But word of the disaster would get out. Arriving to work later than usual, 40-year-old Commander Evan Wyatt was the CXO of the entire port of Halifax. Of the few people that knew about the nature of the Mont Blanc's cargo, he was one of them. So upon arriving at his place of work at Pier 9 and seeing the vessel on fire, he immediately began efforts to get the word out to minimize the damage of the impending explosion. A few blocks away at the local rail yard was train dispatcher Vincent Coleman and his associate William Lovett. Lovett was finishing his night watch and discussing what was happening in the harbor right now. As they were talking, a sailor of the Royal Canadian Navy came running into the office, red-faced and out of breath. "Boys, you've got to get out of here. Run for it, right now. There's been a bad accident. A French munition ship is on fire. The crew have abandoned her and she's adrift. She's up against Pier 6 and is going to blow sky high any second." Coleman and Lovett looked at each other in shock before quickly grabbing their coats. Lovett grabbed the telephone and quickly informed the terminal agent. That done, they both moved to the door. Only Coleman stopped and turned back to his desk. He remembered that the number 9 train from St. John was due in at any moment. The overnighter had nearly 300 people on board and would be stopping right next to Pier 6. Lovett turned to inquire what Coleman was doing. He told him he'd be right behind him and he had something to do real fast. He tapped away at the telegraph, sending one warning message over the key. "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for Pier 6, and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." The clock struck 9:04. The Mont Blanc was burning from stem to stern. Fire crews on land battled in vain to extinguish the blaze in front of a growing crowd. Many Haligonians watched from their windows. A few...
Yeah, so we've got everybody looking out their windows, their glass windows. We've got people gathering while everyone who knows what's going on is trying to get everybody to leave. Like I said, Renee here says talking about the native woman. They stole her child to save them, knowing she would chase them. And again, as the narrator said, those are the only 2 people the crew managed to save that day. Ugh. So again, here we are. Lots of rubberneckers, people coming down to see. You got a train coming into the station. You got people looking out their windows, a school full of children.
Few boats in the harbor attempted to fight the fire or tow the ship away from shore. In an instant, that all ended. The cargo hold carrying its cargo of TNT and picric acid reached a temperature of 572 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which, as we know, as we recall, 572 degrees Fahrenheit is the flash point for that cargo. So they said the only 2 things that could set that off are a sudden jolt and a fire. Well, the sudden jolt caused the fire. The fire brought the cargo up to temperature, and at this point, the largest man-made explosion in history detonated. Up to that point, history up to that point.
Igniting the picric acid, followed by the TNT. The thin metal skin of the hold held the explosion in long enough for the entirety of the load to ignite. In 1/15 of a second, The entire cargo detonated, heating the epicenter up to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
What can you tell me about that number, 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit? 1/15th of a second, this ship was vaporized, essentially, and it heated up to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's essentially the temperature of the surface of the sun. Yeah. Melted to dust, cremated bodies. You could say that. Yeah, Darby O'Hara, correct, vaporizes everything. Yeah, it is essentially the temperature of the surface of the sun. Like the core of the sun's like 15 million degrees, but the surface of the sun sits right around 10,000 degrees. So there you go. You've got the freaking sun in port. That's how hot this was. And we've all seen nuclear explosions. We've all seen big explosions. Even more than the heat, the shock wave.
The blast wave turned the hull of the ship into a makeshift fragmentation grenade, sending out shrapnel at 3,400 miles per hour, 4 times the speed of sound. Instantly, the water surrounding the ship, as well as the people fighting the fire, were vaporized.
The firefighters were vaporized.
The ship was immediately reduced to unrecognizable shrapnel, the largest surviving pieces being the shank from one of the anchors, which was found in the woods 4 miles away, and the barrel to one of the 2 deck guns, which landed 3 miles away, the barrel drooping like a half-melted candle.
So did you hear that? The anchor was found, he's just 4 miles. I don't think it was quite that far. Well, they'll talk more about the anchor later, but they're throwing parts of the ship, gigantic, huge, heavy metal pieces, literally miles. And for those of you not on the that are on the metric system, that's 1.6 kilometers. So 2 miles is 3.2. 3 miles is whatever that is. 4.8 kilometers. Yeah, 4 miles is like 4.8. Lawyers can't do math. Whatever 4 times 1.6 is. That's how far away this was. Giant pieces of metal.
The detonation sent a shockwave into the bedrock beneath the bay at 13,000 miles per hour. An early seismograph 250 miles away at Dalhousie University detecting it. Projectiles from the explosion perforated everything in reach of the Mont Blanc. Shops, building, people, even the nearby IMO received massive amounts of shrapnel. After the explosion came a massive pressure wave. The pressure generated was 14.7 pounds per square inch. This is roughly the pressure experienced by the Titanic's wreck, 2.5 miles underneath the ocean. The pressure wave threw bodies about like rag dolls, some landing half a mile away.
Bodies being launched half a mile away. So that's like a kilometer away. It's throwing bodies a kilometer. Just the shock wave from this.
Mostly wooden buildings were blown down like stacks of cards. People standing, watching the fire from the safety of their homes, were suddenly blinded as their windows burst inwards, showering them with missiles of broken glass.
Yep, and remember all those people that were watching this fire from their glass windows. Literally got shredded. Literally every window in Halifax shattered. A huge portion of the buildings were destroyed, but even the ones that weren't destroyed, Their windows all shattered.
The vaporization of the water around the Mont Blanc and the massive pressure wave created one last vessel of death, a massive tsunami 20 to 30 feet high that raced out in all directions around the harbor, surging ashore and running down streets and through the town. Injured, dying, and dead suddenly swept up by the icy cold water from the harbor and swept away, many ending up in the harbor to drown. After the violent explosion, almost every building in a 2-mile radius of the Mont Blanc was gone, reduced to mere foundation.
Gone. In a 2-mile radius. Gone.
And piles of splintered timbers. 12,000 buildings damaged in total. Instantly, 1,600 people were either killed or not far from death's door. The IMO was picked up by the massive tsunami and dropped onto the Dartmouth shore. All but one on board died. As for the crew of the Mont Blanc, hiding in the Dartmouth hills, all but one of their crews survived, an unlucky sailor being struck by a piece of shrapnel and bleeding to death before they could get him to a doctor.
Sucks to be him.
On Stella Marais, the tug attempting to aid the Mont Blanc, 21 of her 26-man crew were killed. A massive mushroom cloud sent debris and unburnt benzol miles into the air, all of which started to fall back to Earth like greasy black rain. The aftermath of the explosion was the perfect storm. It was morning in Halifax. Families were just starting their day, cooking breakfast on wood-burning stoves. When the mostly wooden buildings were flattened, burning stoves and oil lamps started fires all over town that quickly began to spread. People pinned under downed timbers could do nothing as the fires burned them alive.
See, this is one of these things, like, just when you think it can't get any worse. Okay, the ship has exploded. It's vaporized everybody around it. Well, okay. Oops, no, it leveled every building in a 2-mile radius. Oh, and it shattered glass everywhere in town and literally cut people to ribbons. As I said, 2,000 people were killed in the explosion, and untold thousands more were injured by falling buildings, broken glass, things like that. You even had the one crewman who thinks, oh, good, I'm up here in the hills, I'm safe. Well, he gets hit by a piece of shrapnel and bleeds to death. But that it's not going to get any worse, right? Oh, no, there's a tsunami now. Great. So the tsunami goes and washes out a chunk of the town. Then, oh, good. Oh, good. It's over. It's done with. It's the next day. We can rescue people that are trapped in wooden buildings. We can save people. We can start the recovery efforts. Oh, wait. No, we can't. Because now the city is on fire. Thanks to falling oil and wood buildings scattered all over. Now the city is on fire, and people trapped under the rubble are being cooked alive. Yeah, so it can get worse, and it is getting worse.
Confusion spread faster than the fires, many wondering just what had happened. Those who didn't know about the fire, their homes simply being demolished around them. Rumors spread quickly that it was an attack from the Germans, and more would likely come soon after. Near the piers by the water was the Wellington Barracks. The barracks had been hit hard by the explosion. Many were injured, but this was hardly unique. What was unique was that the barracks had its own magazine, well-stocked and full of ammunition. Nearby lay a furnace for heating the barracks, the explosion spreading hot embers and coals all about. Acting quickly...
Oh, good. It's over. Everybody that's just burned. It's too bad they were the last. Oh, never mind. That isn't the end of it. Now a munitions house is exploding. Oh, I mean, this is like shit you can't make up. If you were to make a movie where this happened, where it just got this bad and then got worse and then got even more bad and then got even more worse, you would walk out of this movie. You would think this was the stupidest effing movie that had ever been made. You know how you do that when it's like the action scenes in Transformers or Lord of the Rings and things like that, where the action just gets piled on top of the action, piled on top of the action, piled on. And at some point you go, oh, all right, can we just have the resolution here, please? Yeah, but this is real life. Now that we've burned everybody in the city to death under rubble, let's just set off the munitions dump.
A lieutenant by the name of C.A. McClellan grabbed an extinguisher and doused the embers, possibly saving countless more lives.
Whew!
But it was a double-edged sword.
Uh-oh.
Dousing the embers caused a massive plume of smoke to be produced. Many saw the plume of smoke from the armory, figuring it to be a flame as well. The word was spread that another explosion was imminent and told others to head for the hills. Rescue efforts were halted mid-rescue as rescuers headed for safety, fearful of another explosion. Many were left trapped before spreading flames as their rescuers fled for their lives.
Ugh.
All in all, thousands were killed in the blast, around 500 of which were children. A great many more were injured, and even more left homeless or without sufficient shelter. As many as 5,000 of those injured received eye injuries, largely from shattered glass. Triage centers were established all over the city as medical professionals did everything they could to stem the storm of injured.
5,000 of the injured people were injured with eye injuries from glass. And that's just the ones. I mean, just imagine how many thousands of others. I don't think there is a count. I didn't quickly see a count on how many were injured. But you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people injured.
Haligonians. To make matters worse, winter struck with full force the next day. Snow fell all across the city, around 1.5 feet of snow in total, covering those without homes, hampering rescue efforts, and burying survivors still trapped. But rescue efforts began nearly immediately after the blast, from police officers, firefighters, military personnel, and even just normal everyday Haligonians. Sailors from the ships moored in the harbor rowed ashore to aid in efforts. Parties came from the HMS Highflyer, HMS Changonola, HMS Knight Templar, and HMS Calgarian. The crews worked to save trapped survivors, even as others fled for fear of the second explosion. Out to sea, the explosion was so powerful it rocked the American Denver-class protected cruiser USS Tacoma, 52 miles away. The ship.
Can you believe that? A ship 52 miles away felt it. It was picked up by earthquake monitoring equipment 250 miles away. I mean, God.
Ship's company entering general quarters believing they were under attack. Upon spotting the massive mushroom cloud, both USS Tacoma and USS von Steuben sailed into Halifax and were rendering aid by 2 p.m. Trains began to arrive from all over Atlantic Canada, some from as far out as Amherst, Nova Scotia, and Moncton, New Brunswick, 120 and 160 miles away respectively. More arriving each day after to help transport patients. That very day, Lieutenant Governor MacCallum Grant established the Halifax Relief Commission, dedicated to treating patients, housing survivors, and paying for funeral costs. The commission would last all the way until 1976 before finally ending, the later years spent paying pensions to relatives of survivors. Due to the large amount of eye-related injuries, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind was established, attempting to aid the thousands.
I mean, look, and it did it again. I was going to say that's the part that struck me. I mean, just literally rendered me speechless when I watched this, and rendered me speechless again just now. I mean, listen to that again.
Later years spent paying pensions to relatives of survivors. Due to the large amount of eye-related injuries, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind was established.
They established the Canadian National Institute for the Blind because this accident blinded so many people. I mean, I literally got nothing for that. Everybody standing in front of those windows, getting their faces just laced, just shredded, their eyes, losing their eyes, having their eyes cut, having pieces of glass embedded in their eyes. There were so many of those people that it led to the foundation of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. just but
attempting to aid the thousands with eye injuries. The institute still exists to this day. A judicial inquiry known as the Wreck Commissioner's Inquiry was formed to investigate the accident. After a lengthy investigation, the commission attempted to lay blame upon Frances Mackay and Captain Lemadec, saying due to the nature of her cargo, it was the Mont Blanc's sole responsibility to avoid collision. A surprising finding, seeing as the IMO was on the incorrect side of the channel. Charges of manslaughter were laid upon the captain and the pilot, but not enough evidence was available to support the charges.
yeah, because there was literally no law on the side of the prosecution there. Yeah, I mean, you have dangerous stuff. It's your job to keep out of the way. They were keeping out of the way. They did everything they could, and the fact that these guys were under any suspicion at all freaks me out. I mean, it just should never have happened. They should have crucified the captain of the IMO.
And they were subsequently dropped. In the end, the 1917 Halifax explosion maintained a long-standing legacy as the largest man-made explosion until 1945. It still remains one of the largest non-nuclear man-made explosions in history. It was the perfect storm of wrong place, wrong time, with disastrous circumstances that would affect the lives of thousands and leave a lasting mark on an already war-torn world, showing that, despite being thousands of miles away from the front, war is still hell and affects everyone in one way or another. Thanks for tuning in for another video. This one has been highly requested and was a very long time coming, but I hope you found it educational. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon for sticking it out with me and continuing to support me. That means a lot.
Seeing as how I'm using
if you're
this
looking
video,
to support
let's
my
let it
efforts
play
and
through
don't
here.
got the money to do so, that's no sweat. Just like the video, comment if you like, and subscribe if you haven't. You know, the usual YouTuber rigmarole. If you want to support my channel artist, I have links for merch and patches in the description. All the money for that goes to feeding a struggling artist.
So go to Maritime Horrors and check out what's there. I'm reaching out to him to sort of get explicit permission to hopefully use everything here. And then, again, another interesting person I'd like to have on the stream to talk about why they're interested in stuff like this and why they do this stuff. But yeah, go there. Go to Maritime Horrors. Check him out. Subscribe to his channel. Like this video and like all the other videos that he does. I mean, that's rough. We've got a few more things to discuss in relation to this. But man, that is literally just going from bad to worse in the absolute most classic sense of that phrase. But it happened again and again, and it went from worse to even more worse to unbelievably even more worse to you couldn't possibly be this bad, but it did, to even worse than that. Wow. And we have Flock saying, this reminds me of the explosion in Beirut 3 years ago. Yeah, remember that explosion. But like, at least they have modern tools to recover. But damn. Yeah, if you haven't seen that Beirut explosion, that's something to go look at. Just search for Beirut explosion and you'll see something along this line. I think we did it. I think we watched it, some of the Beirut explosions as well, when we were talking about the Texas case a few months ago. But yeah, I mean, these massive explosions are just, I mean, crazy. And we've got a few chats that don't come up here. First of all, Mr. Terrible, member for 2 months. Thank you, Mr. Terrible. Member of the Clean and Sober crew for 2 months says, I guess we see why Norway isn't known for its navy or seamanship. Okay. And Viking Wolf by Blood has gifted 10 Legal Vices memberships. If you were one of the lucky people to get a gifted membership a short time ago, which would be about 10 minutes ago, thank Viking Wolf by Blood. It was all heard. And I think that catches us up on the super chats. It does. Let's do our midstream grift here. Real quickly, we currently have 554. I think this is the most we've ever had for a Maritime Monday watching this. We have 554 people here watching currently, 490 likes. Everybody should go over and hit that like button because it's awesome. And Everybody should hit the subscribe button as well. We've got a few subscribers back since we started. We got 3 subscribers here back since we started. Like I said, 30 people just got unsubscribed. 30 people just got unsubscribed from my channel in about the past 9 hours because YouTube. I'm lucky. Other people are taking hundreds of subscriber hits in this random deletion going on. So if you've already subscribed, please just double check, look down there and make sure you're still subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed, I would deeply appreciate the honor of getting your subscription. And hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and go over and take our poll. We have a lovely little poll going here. Let's see where we stand so far. We currently have 410 votes. So we have 500 likes and 410 votes. Everybody get over there and take that poll after you hit the like button. The poll is, great. Typo in the poll. I hit the like and subscribe buttons like 15% of you said you hit the like and subscribe like 2 ships going bump in the night. 24% of you said you hit that like and subscribe button like a pirate hitting a bottle of grog. 29% of you said I hit the like and subscribe button like the Titanic hitting an iceberg. And the current leader with 32% of the vote is I hit the like and subscribe button like Rose shoved Jack off the door. And y'all know that's referring to Kate Winslet shoving poor young Jack off the door, making him sink into the depths of the ocean at the end of Titanic. Leonardo got shoved off the door by Kate Winslet. Rose shoved Jack off the door. That's currently leading. So take the poll by hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and then go over and take the poll. There you go. That's the midstream grift. We all caught up on super chats, like, subscribe, return to the videos. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to that video we were looking at a minute ago where the lady showed us how the ships maneuvered. But we're going to hit the part that I wanted to hit, the explosion part of it. Let's look at some more of that. I mean, it's wild. It's wild, the effect of this. Again, this is 60 Symbols. You want to go check out some cool stuff over at 60 Symbols as well. Some cool science stuff going on over there. Some fun. If you like science, you'll love that place.
Danger, stay away. For obviously reasons, you don't want to do that in wartime. So very few people actually knew that it was a ship loaded with high munitions. The crew, immediately seeing how futile the situation was, got into their lifeboats. They start moving towards the Dartmouth side. They're shouting all the way. They're shouting warnings to people, but the warnings are either not heard or they're not
heard about in the other video
because they're in French. So now we've got the situation where the ship is on fire. It's now nestled against Pier 6 on the Halifax side. The fire is raging. The benzol and then later the monochlorobenzol is reaching boiling points. Those barrels are shooting up into the air and exploding. So it's a big spectacle. People are rushing to win.
And this is from apparently a Halifax documentary, The Halifax Explosion, Shattered City. So yeah, you got people rubbernecking, going, "Oh, look, woohoo, it's like a fireworks show."
Are shooting up into the air and exploding. So it's a big spectacle. People are rushing to windows. They're rushing down the streets to see what's going on. What's happening in the hold is that these are hermetically, very carefully constructed holds to hold these high explosives. The fire is raging, the temperatures are increasing, and whether eventually it's from the incredibly high temperatures and pressures inside these sealed compartments, or whether it's an impact from these exploding barrels coming down and hitting the deck, detonation occurs. The picric acid explodes.
So she's a scientist. So this is what she's doing. She's explaining the science behind the explosion. And it's fascinating to me.
Sends a shockwave through the neighboring barrels. The hold explodes, sends an air blast through the rest of the ship. One by one, the hold's full of picric acid, dry picric acid. The wet picric acid and the gun cotton, which have the water inside them has evaporated, turning them into high explosives as well, detonates as well. You've now got a ship with 3 kilotons of high explosives, which is now the largest bomb that human beings have ever made. And at 9:04 on December 6, 1917, it exploded. Well, instantly, there's a massive fireball that reaches 5,000 degrees Celsius. That's nearly the temperature of the surface of the sun. And it engulfs the neighboring streets.
Like people on the land, mate.
People in the land incinerated. The Mont Blanc, 3 million kilograms of iron hull destroyed. White hot shards of iron are flung through the air faster than bullets and rain down on the neighboring area. Most devastating was the air blast, traveling 1,000 meters per second through the narrow streets. It causes unimaginable devastation to houses, to human beings, to the whole city. Remember that many of these people are standing, looking at this spectacle, lining the steep hills leading down to the harbor, looking out at the burning ship. When it explodes, all of the windows in the city explode as well. And most of them are driven inwards, horrifically injuring people. Everything that wasn't immediately blown up as a structure catches on fire. It's a huge firestorm throughout the city. As the air blast goes out and the gases cool, the air rushes back in again, and tornadoes full of debris start sweeping through the streets.
You see that, like, with, like the videos of the nuclear explosions and things, where the initial shock wave, the initial pressure wave goes out, and then it gets sucked back up in, and then that's what makes the mushroom cloud. Everything on the ground getting sucked back into the center and then ejected. And we've seen this picture a lot of times. This is one of the only pictures of the actual explosion. And I mean, you can see the mountain here coming up out of the shore.
The 1.4 thousand kilogram anchor of the Mont Blanc was flung kilometers away, way over.
Did you hear that?
Debris start sweeping through the streets. The
1.4 thousand kilogram.
1.4 thousand kilogram anchor of the
1.4 thousand kilograms is basically 3,000 pounds ish. I guess it's like 2,500 pounds, maybe somewhere around there. 2, 4, yeah. So we'll say, I mean that's crazy. 2.8. So yeah, we'll say 3,000 pounds. Why not? 3,000 pounds. This anchor weighed. And how far did this anchor go?
Through the streets. The 1.4 thousand kilogram anchor of the Mont Blanc was flung kilometers away, way over on the other side of the city, and can still be seen today where it landed.
This 1,140 pound anchor shaft. This is just the shaft of the anchor. The hook part of the anchor would be down here. This is just the shaft part of the anchor. 1,140 pounds. So we'll say that's 500 kilograms. A little less than 500 kilograms. Was found 2.35 miles away. That's 4 kilometers. This piece of steel was found 4 kilometers away, 2.35 miles away from the ship. How do you even do that?
Going back to what happened in the harbor, the expanding gases pushed the water away, forming a hole in the water in the harbor. That, just like when you throw something into a pond and you see the ripples rebound, caused a huge geyser to appear in the harbor. That sucked water away from the opposite shores and then sent a huge tsunami, funneled down these narrow harbor walls, reaching 20 feet in height, causing even more devastation.
Look at that city.
At the end of that morning,
there's no city there.
You had 2,000 people dead, 9,000 people severely injured. 12,000 homes destroyed, and every single building within a 12-mile radius damaged.
You can find out more
Oof.
about the Halifax explosion.
I mean, just the science behind that is stunning. Caitlin says, "I love how expressive she is with her whole arms." That's why I like science teachers that can teach. I mean, wow. I mean, that's literally the largest man-made explosion in the history of planet Earth up to that point. And when you're talking about throwing bodies half a kilometer, you're like a kilometer away, half a mile. We're talking about throwing 500 kilograms, 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles. We're talking about throwing the rest of the anger, possibly even farther. I mean, it's just insane, the force of this explosion. There's so many blind people blinded by flying glass. They had to start the National Institute for the Blind. I mean, that's crazy. Well, Rutger 919 says 11,000 killed and wounded, just living their life. You'll notice she said 9,000 severely injured people. How many more hundreds or thousands were suffering minor injuries? It's astounding. The next thing I want to bring up here is just a couple of pictures. We've seen most of them, I think, but this is from the Halifax. So never mind. Is that the one we want? Yeah. This is the Halifax explosion from the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. This is the IMO here after the explosion. It's just kind of chilling, hanging out there. That's this is the Narrows again, where it happened. And these are just regular buildings. This is the train station. Normal people, coming in. They're on Pier 2. The troops coming in to do it. And this is the school that was destroyed. Remember, that school had children in it at the time. It said about 500 children died in this. At least 9,000 were injured and many more were homeless. And then winter came the next day, as they said. These are just pictures of the devastation. More than 500 train cars were damaged, including most of the city's military hospital cars. 61 train crew were killed. Rail links were destroyed. The channel was choked with ruins of wharves, boats, sheds, and ships wrecked and adrift. For more than a kilometer along the shore, the rail facilities were obliterated. Here's a museum here. And I mean, that's crazy stuff there, man. It's just wild. It looks like we're going to pull this thing right into the 2-hour mark, like I hoped. Yay me. We'll watch this last thing. And again, this last thing here that we're going to watch comes from Robbie Dobby, who, as we talked about at the beginning, her husband's great-grandfather was Francis Mackey, the pilot on the Mont Blanc, the one that they tried to get to nail him for manslaughter. Was manslaughter they wanted to charge him with, because supposedly it was his sole responsibility to stay out of the way of every other thing that could possibly go wrong. But he was ultimately completely acquitted. But she, when she emailed me a link to this interview, this recorded interview with the pilot, Francis Mackey, that took place like 50 years after this happened. And we'll wrap this up listening to this interview with Mackey. himself, the pilot of the ship that exploded. Let's see, let's make this smaller here. There's not much to it.
One man who was more intimately concerned with the cause of the disaster than any we have yet heard is Captain Frank Mackey. Captain Mackey was the pilot on board the munition ship Mont Blanc that ill-fated morning. He was one of those charged with responsibility for the disaster, but he was fully exonerated by both the Supreme Court of Canada and the Privy Council. I talked to him in his pleasant home in Spryfield, a Halifax suburb. He is 86 now.
Darth Hideous asks, how is he not vaporized? Ship go boom. Because the crew of the ship, they knew what they were sitting on, and they got off the ship. They sailed to the other side of the harbor in their lifeboats and tried to warn people away, but they only succeeded in rescuing 2 people, a mother and her child. They were the only ones that listened to them. So the crew escaped. All of the crew escaped, except for one guy who was hit by a piece of shrapnel and bled to death.
His voice is old and his health is poor, but his mind is keen and his memory clear, and he told me a story that few men still alive could tell.
I came in on the Mont Blanc. The ship in the first place was supposed to be, a ship bound in was supposed to have the right of way. No other ship was allowed to pass her coming out. And they didn't know the...
There's a good point that he makes right here that I don't think they alluded to it in the first video, but they didn't come right out and say it. An inbound ship has the right of way. Some of you are asking, well, couldn't they have just blocked off the port? Couldn't they have just waited? They should have waited. I mean, just any ship that is inbound has the right of way. That's just where it starts. They have priority, inbound ships. So the outbound IMO should have waited, should have stayed out of the way, should have done everything that they didn't do.
IMO was in the port. And that seems silly, but that's exactly what. The reason they didn't know, she was anchored in the southwest part of the basin, and she was behind the hills. Unless you went way up on the top of a hill and went out in the boat, you couldn't see that ship. Now, we arrived on the examination ground. Ships were only allowed into Bedford Basin in daylight. I was late in the afternoon, and the man from the examining boat came alongside, as they all had to do to find out what the ship's cargo was and so on. But I said, just wait a minute. You're standing on top of 500 tons of TNT now, both of us. The rest of our cargo is picric acid, dry and wet, and benzol on deck. Now I says, that's a damn bad cargo.
See, 50 years later, 85 years old-ish, I believe he said he was 85, failing health, he still remembers exactly what cargo was on that ship and where it was at. And I love how he put that. He told the inspector, that's a damn bad cargo. Yeah, we that's what we've been talking about this entire thing. It was a damn bad cargo.
And benzol on deck. Now I says, that's a damn bad cargo. I said, what I'd like you to do is ask the examining officer aboard the ship there, ask or tell him there that I expect to get special orders for this ship through the night. Ask him if they can arrange it. Next morning, daylight came and I was ordered to get on the way. I asked if there's any special orders in the way of protection for the ship. They said, no, sir. We come up, arrived up there. We were coming as slow as we possibly could, just steerage, Your Honor. And the other ship was coming down on his wrong side. He was answering my one blast with 2, decidedly opposite to what he should do. He should have answered me with 1 and kept close to the Halifax side. Instead of that, he had passed the ship on the wrong side up above in the basin, above the Narrows. And when he got down, he kept over
Man.
towards Tupper Cove way. The water looked wider to him. When he got down a little further, he found it was narrowing up across him, see? And he got cold feet and put a full speed astern when he was on my starboard side, and that's what cut her into me.
That's when you hit.
Yes, he cut her right into me. It's like taking your horse by the bridle and say, I'm not going that way, see? Well, we stood there as long as we could. The fire on deck, the benzol was burning. The friction between the plates of the two ships created a spark.
Mm.
We stood there till there's no use to stay there any longer. I said, the only thing to do is save your crew. I said, get them in the boat. So filled up one boat with about 20 men, 21. And the boat I was in, and the captain, last to go, we had about 20 men, or 21, perhaps 22. And we pulled away from the ship. There was a Navy tug going down past us, and we hailed him, and I waved to him to take us in tow. Hollered, but you might as well holler at the post. Nobody could hear, too much racket. Chasing him the second time put us on the dot on the side, and we had no room to maneuver with a pile of men. The only thing was get around the beach and turn the men ashore. The captain, he was driving his men, and I went up on the bank, stood looking at things and expecting her to go off any time. And I stood there, he come back and put his hand on my shoulder. He said, come on, man, come on. So we both turned around to run, and we didn't get any distance. Just as quick as that, we were knocked down. I had a raincoat on here and was taken off the same as you take a rusty knife and cut it right around.
Right around your waist.
Right around.
Oh,
We were knocked right down. And there was a tree
listen to that
fell
again.
over us.
God, that is so
We
descriptive.
didn't get any distance. Just as quick as that, we were
Listen
knocked
to that.
down. I had a raincoat on here and was taken off the same as you take a rusty knife and cut it right around.
Right around your waist.
Right around. We were knocked right down.
Oof.
And there was a tree fell over us, just like a miracle. The branches on it were bigger than my arm. And he seemed to be between two, and I was between another two. My cap was gone off my head that I had on, and this coat was torn off.
I mean, God, imagine that. He and the captain are running away. The blast happens, and it whether it was shrapnel or something else, it ripped the bottom half of his raincoat out, knocked a tree down, and just like the movie, he said two branches bigger than his head, one on each side of him. So just like in the movies, in the wacky escape scenes, this literally happened where the trees fall with like one gigantic branch on either side of his body.
I knew I was smelling this stuff all the time. I knew I was alive. And after a while, I stood up. I guess I must have been down there probably 10 or 15 minutes.
How do you think the collision could have been avoided? What should have been done?
By not allowing the IMO out.
Mm-hmm.
He come out on his wrong side, broke the rule to come on the wrong side of a steamer up above in the Narrows, and then come down on the wrong side again and struck me.
Well,
He wasn't supposed to be coming out. There was no ship allowed to come out if the signals and all had been carried out by the dockyard. There was no ship allowed to come out when a ship for convoy was bound in. Had the right of way herself, but she come out.
Once the collision took place, could anything have been done to prevent the explosion?
That right there killed me. And I know this is total apples to oranges, but it was like with the Sarah Boone trial with their husband locked in the suitcase, and she's, F you, F that, F him, and he's saying, help me, and she, on the tape, on the recording, you just have her talking to her husband, who she's essentially allegedly locked in the suitcase, and she just says, "Shh." This is on that same level when there's once the collision happened, is there anything that could have been done to prevent the collision? And just that, that guts me.
Once the collision took place, could anything have been done to prevent the explosion?
That fucking gives me chills, man. I mean, seriously, I've got goosebumps from that. Like, literally from my wrists down my legs, I can feel the goosebumps now. That's powerful. Just that. Ugh. All right, let's wrap this up.
No ship allowed to come out when a ship for convoy was bound in. Had the right of way herself, but she come out.
Once the collision took place, could anything have been done to prevent the explosion?
No. Explosion, she was out of business. You couldn't do anything with her. Nobody was throwing water on her.
Could she have been taken in tow?
Well, it would, just a question. They wouldn't have had time. Take her in tow and tow her anywhere.
Do I keep saying? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I know I keep saying husband. Sorry for their boyfriend, girlfriend. Sorry for the Sarah Boone case. I don't know why I keep saying husband, but they're not. Wow. That's really powerful. I mean, I got really, really nothing to add. And again, just like so many of these accidents, so many of these things we cover, they just start with somebody doing something wrong. On the wrong side of the channel. Wouldn't get over. For whatever reason. Inability, pride, whatever. For whatever reason, just didn't move over. And the collision happened. And as they mentioned, if this would have been any other ship, wouldn't have made a bit of difference. Would have just put a little hole in it, a big hole in it. Insurance companies would have argued, would have been done. But wow, nope, wrong ship, full of chemicals, explosion, done. And as you said, is there anything that could have been done to stop it once the collision happened? He said, no, that's it. 9,000 people dead or seriously injured. Thousands more probably just regular injured. So many people blinded by flying glass. They have to start a National Institute for the Blind. It's a crazy story. I have no idea what we're going to be doing next week, but next week we'll do another Maritime Monday. Viking Wolf by Blood says, finish my master's in military history. I'd give my big toe to lunch with you to pick your brain. The knowledge and conversation would be incredible. I would walk away limping, but with so much knowledge. Oh, thank you for saying that. I don't know if that's true, but thank you for saying. There is one thing that I'm really, really, really trying to put together. I don't know. Get this gigantic message out of my face. I don't know if it'll happen before May. There's one really, really big interview I'm trying to get. Well, I can get it. It's just when I can get it is the question. For reasons, it might not be possible to do it before May. But after May, I'm pretty sure I can get. I can do this interview I wanted to. But yeah, another big thing. To be Flair says Philadelphia experiment. I'll fog it until it manifests. Yeah, we're going to be doing one of these days. Our Unexplained will overlap with Maritime Monday, and we'll do a whole show on the Philadelphia experiment. So, all right, that's all I've got for Maritime Monday today, folks. Let's wrap this up. Tell you what's coming up this week and what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks. But let's close our poll out first. If you haven't hit the like button and haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Make sure you have a chance to take the poll in the next 15 seconds. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Currently, there's 554 of you here, 580 likes. Like button, subscribe. Here's our poll, and then we will wrap it up. All right. Coming in at 4th place in our poll, I hit that like and subscribe button like two ships going bump in the night. In 3rd place with 30% of the votes. No, sorry, in 3rd place with 25% of the votes. I hit that like and subscribe button like a pirate hitting a bottle of grog. And coming in 2nd place, this is a close one. 30% in 2nd place. I hit the like and subscribe button like the Titanic hitting an iceberg. But the number one answer for the like and subscribe poll today is with 31%. 30% 2nd place, 31%, just 1% more. I hit the like and subscribe button like Rose shoved Jack off the door. Thank you for taking part in the poll. That was super nice of you. Appreciate it. If you've already subscribed to the channel previously, please check, make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube. And if you're new and you're newly subscribing, thank you. Thank you so much. We've done a lot today here. This is Maritime Monday. We do this every Monday, unless there's a reason not to do it. Coming up tomorrow, join me for more of the Sarah Boone trial preparation. Legal Vices, Andrew Esquire from Legal Mindset. I'm Legal Vices. Never mind. Andrew Esquire from Legal Mindset will be here tomorrow to discuss the Sarah Boone trial preparation. What I plan on doing is reading the affidavit. Hey, dumbass! I'm in the middle of a show. I will get whatever stupid. Oh, your ball fell down there. The ball fell behind the sleeping bag over there. Great. We'll get in just a second, buddy. Hang tight. Shut up for like 2 minutes. Thanks. Appreciate it, bud. All right. As I was saying, tomorrow we're going to be looking at the affidavit from the police officers that they signed to get the arrest warrant. We'll be reading a letter that she wrote. We'll be watching some video of other interviews with neighbors, family members, things like that. As many of those as we can. And we'll be talking generally about it. There's one other person I'm trying to get involved. Let me see if we have a response. We don't have a response from that person yet. But hopefully. Oh, good. Never mind. We do have a confirmation. In addition to Legal Mindset, Andrew Esquire and I, this is a Florida case. So we will also be joined for a brief period of time by Mr. Stephen N. Gosney, a death penalty appellate assistant public defender from Florida, who will be talking to us about the charges and potential penalties she will be facing. So join us tomorrow for Legal Mindset, Andrew and I, and Stephen Gosney. And we will take you down the road leading up to the trial. The trial of Sarah Boone begins on January 30th, Monday, January 30th. Legal Mindset, Andrew and I will be jointly streaming that trial. I'll take the morning sessions. He'll join me for lunch. I'll update him on what happened in the morning session. Then we'll turn everything over to him and he'll do the afternoon sessions. So that's how we're going to do the Sarah Boone trial when it comes. So you're going to want to join us. Other people are going to be streaming it. But frankly, we're the best ones out there. We rock and we're awesome. And you'll want to watch us because that's who we are. And coming up on Wednesday, we're going to be watching an interview by the Uvalde police chief, that was irresponsible. I wanted to say responsible. That was irresponsible in his actions during the Uvalde school shooting that happened recently. A couple of days after the shooting, he was being questioned about why it took them 73 minutes to do anything. And you're going to want to watch this on Wednesday because it doesn't answer any good questions. It doesn't answer any questions in a good way, and it won't make you like him anymore. But we're going to watch that video. Thursday is O.J. Simpson. Friday will be just a chill stream. And Friday morning will be a chill stream. Friday morning U.S. time. Friday evening U.S. time will be another edition of The Unexplained with our very own Mod Flux and Hannah Franz and myself. That'll take us through the weekend, and that'll take us to next Monday, where maybe the Murdaugh trial will start. In which case, Andrew and I will also be doing that one as well in the same manner. So we got a lot So this week is pretty much the last week of normalcy. Then we're going to be probably doing at least 3 weeks to a month of trial every day. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun. We'll take a break from our other stuff and just do the trials. So, all right, everybody, thank you for being here. That's what we did. That's what we're going to be doing. I appreciate my mods. You guys are super awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping out. Thank you for everything you do. Chat, you're the greatest chat on the entire YouTube platform. The Vice Squad rules. You don't want to go anywhere. Wait a minute here. We've got a couple super chats left. Woo, Bad Weather Biker. Do the Squala submarine rescue. That's on the list, actually. That's on the list. It'll be a long time before we get there, but it's on the list. And definitely not Brandon. Wait, I was going to request a toast. Okay, make it quick. Get that toast in here, and we will see what we've got. Go ahead, make a toast. Definitely not Brandon. You got a few minutes. Well, in a few seconds, actually. Don't see it here. So, anywho, you better come in before we wrap it up. And to be Flair, clean and sober, 2 months. Thank you for all you do, Jeff. We keep showing up and appreciate you doing the same. I show up most of the time. So, all right, that's it. Looks like we didn't get a definitely not Brandon toast in under the deadline, but we'll see if it comes in the next 30 seconds, which is what it's going to take to wrap this up. Everybody, thank you for being here. Again, as I said, mods can't do it without you. Chat, if you weren't here, there'd be no reason to do this. And for those of you that are watching, listening, and have it on in the background while you're driving around town, doing your work, doing whatever it is you're doing, and we're just background noise, do me a favor. Come back later. Ooh, ghost ball. Come back later and leave a like, leave a comment. And for those of you, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. For those of you that are on the replay crew that feel left out because you can't do super chats, if any of you feel left out because you can't do super chats, right down there, you'll see a super like button. You can do a super like. Same thing. I'll see it later and I'll read it later. So there we go. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Definitely not Brandon. Next time, brother man. Appreciate everything you guys do. Love you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Legal Mindset Andrew and Stephen N. Gosney for Sarah Boone. Until then, take care and enjoy your legal vices. Larax out. Larax out.